If you don't know me, my name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here, and I just want to say welcome to each and every one of you. And if you're a visitor with us, man, what a unique time to come and visit a church. I think about this every week. Every week as I prepare a sermon, I think about the different people who are going to be hearing this sermon. I actually pray and I ask God to bring people to my mind. Sometimes He'll bring people, their names to my mind, specific people that I know as I'm preparing a sermon. And other times He may even just bring an image to my mind. It's like, I've seen you. I may have not met you. I may not know your name yet, but I've seen you sitting here, and as I'm praying and preparing for a sermon, your face will come to my mind, and I'll prepare the sermon that way. I also think about it in terms of categories. I think about the different types of people who may be attending and listening to the message that I'm about to preach, and so sometimes I think about the fact that there are people who are first-time visitors every Sunday. Like every single Sunday, we have people who have never stepped foot in this church before who are coming, and they're curious, and then every Sunday, there are people who don't know Jesus yet. They have not surrendered their lives to Christ. They're on a journey. They're exploring. They're asking questions. They're here, so they're curious. Maybe a friend invited them, and they wanted to come and see what this whole Jesus thing was all about. And then I think about the fact that there are some people who are in both of those categories. They don't know Jesus, and this is their first time. And if that's you, I just want to say, man, props to you for getting outside of your comfort zone and taking a huge leap of faith and coming and joining us here. And then I think about the fact that today is the day that you just so happen to land here, and we're in the middle of a series on money. And out of all the things for a church to talk about on your first Sunday, we are talking about money. And I would imagine there's probably some discomfort. You're like, oh, are you kidding me? The money message on my first Sunday? Well, it's not just going to be your first. If you keep coming back, it's your second, your third, and your fourth. We got 4 more weeks of this thing. We started it last week. We got 4 more weeks of this series. But the reason why we're doing this is for that very reason. Because listen, it's not just you. It's not just first-time visitors. It's not just people who don't know what they believe about Jesus yet. It's actually everybody. And so if you're uncomfortable here today, when we're talking about money, I want you to know you're not alone. Everybody is. And that's why we're doing it. That's why we're having these money talks, because nobody likes to talk about money. No one, no matter how much you've been in the church, no matter how financially secure you may be. Y'all, listen, I've been in the church my whole life. My dad was a pastor for a part of my childhood, and I was raised in the church. My earliest memories are being in the church. I've spent time in the church my entire life. I've been working in the church my entire adult life. And I would tell you, my wife and I, we've been living by these financial principles for many, many years that we have learned from God's Word, and yet it still can be challenging and uncomfortable at times to talk about money. And yet it's incredibly important for us to, because God's desire is for each and every one of you to be financially free. That's what He wants for each and every one of you, to be financially free. And the enemy's desire is to have each and every one of you financially enslaved. He wants you enslaved in every area of your life, including your finances. And so we've got to talk about this and see what God has to say about this, because you may not like talking about it, but as we discovered last week, Jesus loves talking about money. He loves talking about it. 25% of all of His teachings have to do with money, wealth, or possessions. And Jesus' desire, again, is for you to be free. He came to set you free in every area of your life, including in your finances. And so today, we're asking the second of 5 questions that we are working through in the series. Today, the question is, how much is enough? How much is enough? You see, we're going to get into the more practical stuff here as we work through this series, but it's so important that you hear this. Money, at its core, is spiritual. Money is a spiritual matter. We like to think that it's a practical matter. We like to think that it's a financial matter. We like to think that it's a logical matter. We like to think that it's a discipline matter. And yes, it's all of those things, but at its core, it is a spiritual matter. Jesus makes this clear, as we will discover as we work through this series. He makes this clear. But before we can ever get to the point where we're financially free, we have to understand the spiritual nature of money, which is why today we're asking the question, how much is enough? How much is enough? And as we're going to discover, this is a very spiritual issue. Luke chapter 12 is where we're going today. Picking it up at verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Let me pause here for just a second and give you the context. Earlier in this chapter, you will see that Jesus is teaching what Luke describes as a crowd of many thousands of people. Many thousands of people have showed up to hear Jesus teach, and he's specifically teaching on the subject of trusting God and not worrying about the concerns and the cares of this life. And so I just want you to think about how wild this scene would be. Jesus teaching many thousands of people about not worrying about life. And in the middle of his teaching about not worrying, somebody stands up and says, "Hey, teacher, I've got a bunch of worries and concerns I need you to address. Tell my brother to divide the inheritance between him and me." Y'all, we can fit, there in this room, we have 971 seats. 971 seats is how many people we can fit in here if every seat were completely full. So we don't get to quite 1,000 people in the room in any one service. But can you imagine just even in this room, like this would be like me preaching on a normal Sunday morning. Like imagine the last series we just worked through about relationships and marriage. And imagine I'm in the middle of a sermon talking about, serving your spouse, loving your spouse. And then some man stands up and says, "Hey, Pastor Chris, tell my wife to listen to me and do what I said." That's ridiculous. And y'all, early on when I first started this church, I thought I just cannot imagine a scenario where that would ever happen. Now 10 years in, I'm like, oh, I could totally see it. I could totally see it. Like, especially, like I know my church. I love y'all, but y'all are crazy, man. So I just want to go on record and say, like, if you ever do that, I will be so kind to you in return. But we have armed security, and they may not be as kind to you in return. So just use your own judgment on whether or not you want to interrupt. But just to put yourself in this situation, Jesus is teaching thousands of people, and this guy goes, "My circumstances are more important than everybody else. My situation is more important than anything else you're doing right now. And I know you're a teacher with this kind of new authority that's unlike anything anybody else has ever heard. Everybody's hanging on your word. So if you tell him, he'll do it. Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance between him and me." Now, his complaints may have been legitimate. See, in the first century ancient world, the way that it worked in this Jewish culture is that if you had a sibling, the oldest brother, the oldest male in the family would receive a double portion of the inheritance, and then everybody else would receive an equal share of what was left. And so maybe there were only two brothers, and so his older brother, maybe he was hoarding all of the inheritance. And he goes, "No, I need my fair share." Maybe his complaint was very legitimate. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't time for him to receive his inheritance. But either way, this man interrupts what Jesus is doing and interrupts everybody else's life to say, "My life is more important than anything else that's happening right now. Focus on me. Give me what I want." Now, as crazy as that sounds, how many of us have a relationship with Jesus that looks an awful lot like this? How many of us, this is how we approach Jesus on the regular? How many of us, we only go to Jesus when we need something? Rather than spending time with him, in his presence, to worship him and to thank him. When's the last time you went to Jesus without asking him for something, but rather just to bless him for what he's already given you? How many of us live the same way, and we like to think that Jesus exists for our purposes, to give us what we want because we know he has power and authority, but we want him to use it for our own benefit? How many of us live the same way? See, I think part of the problem is even the way we have thought about our relationship with Jesus in its entirety. I know for me as a kid, when I was raised in the church, I consistently heard the salvation invitation, which was that you need to invite Jesus into your heart. And now listen, I'm not trying to criticize, and if you're here and you're somebody who that's how you were saved, I'm not saying you're unsaved, don't hear me the wrong way. But I think that if we're not careful, we can present the wrong version of Christianity, which is about inviting Jesus into our life. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be real for just a second. Your life sucks. Like, no offense, but your life sucks. I'm not interested in following your life. I love you, but I'm not all that interested in following your life. Don't invite me into your life. Jesus isn't interested in being invited into your life. He's doing the exact opposite. He's inviting you into his life. Jesus says, come and follow me. He's not interested in being in your life as much as he's interested in you being in his life. Can I remind you, he is the vine, we are the branches, not the other way around. And so this man is treating Jesus as if the man is the vine, Jesus is the branch, Jesus is going to give him what he wants. And Jesus goes, are you kidding me? Look at his response, verse 14. Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? So he first just addresses the ridiculous. Like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Who do you think I am that you're going to invite me right now to settle this dispute between you and your brother? Like, how did you come to this conclusion? Who appointed me into this role in your life? And then from there he said to them, verse 15, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So Jesus says, hey, you're going to interrupt me. I'm going to use you as a teachable moment. You just became my teachable moment. So he addresses the man first, then he addresses the crowd. So I'm going to teach you all something from this scenario right here. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So what Jesus is saying is that the natural drift is toward greed. That you have to watch out. That you have to resist it. You have to fight against this. The natural drift for all of us is toward greed, not away from it. It's not neutral. A broken, sinful, fallen world that we live in with broken people and broken hearts, we will naturally drift. If we aren't attached to the vine, we will naturally drift toward a life of greed, not away from it. And he says, watch out, be on your guard. You have to put things in place. You have to be aware. You have to set boundaries in place to prevent this from happening. Why? Because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So here's the question that you have to wrestle with then. Do you believe Jesus? Do you believe? These are his words. Life, the true life, the good life, the purposeful, meaningful life that we all want. He says, it's not found in an abundance of possessions. Again, most of us, we like 75% of Jesus' teachings. We're all on board for 75% of his teachings. When it comes to wealth, possessions, and money, we're like, I'm not so sure. Either he's Lord or he's not. Right. Either he's 100% right or he's not right about anything. He says life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And I think a lot of us in here go, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. It doesn't consist in an abundance of possessions. It just consists in a few more than I have right now. Just a few more. Not an abundance. Not like all those rich people. And whoever those rich people are, usually it's just people who have a little bit more than you have. Not like all those rich people. Just a few more things than I have right now. And then Jesus doubles down. Watch this. Verse 16. Then he told him this parable. He goes, you going to interrupt me? You picked on the wrong man today. I'm going to stay in this lane now for a while. You wanted me to settle this dispute. Now I'm going to make not only a teachable moment, I'm going to tell a whole parable to help you understand just how significant this is. And then he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Let me pause here for a second. I want you to notice some important details. This is significant. Do not miss this. First of all, according to the parable that Jesus told, so Jesus is making up the story. He's choosing to tell it this way. According to the words of Jesus, in the parable, there was a certain rich man, already rich. Did you catch that? Already wealthy. And he said, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Where did this abundance come from? God. Don't miss this. God blessed this already rich man with even more. He gave him an abundance. We talked about this last week. Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. How did this man come about this abundance? From the earth, from the ground that God caused. God blessed him and caused him to have even more than he already had. God gave him more. So can I remind you again that God owns it all? That's right. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, including everyone in it. You and me, we belong to God. This man belongs to God. The earth belongs to God. The crops belong to God. God entrusted it to this man and made this man a steward and a wealthy steward. He gave him even more. He already had enough. He was already rich, and God gave him even more. This is so important that we understand this. The point of the story is not being rich is wrong. It's not that wealth is wrong. That's not what he's saying. That's not the point. God blessed him with it. So it's not that you're wrong for being wealthy or rich. I'm not here to present a poverty gospel in the same way that I'm not here to present a prosperity gospel. I'm here to present a provision gospel, which is that God will provide, he will supply all of your needs according to his riches, and that God will give you even more as you are a faithful steward with it. But when he does, watch this, you will be held accountable for it. You will be held accountable for it. Wealth is not bad. It isn't wrong to have riches. What you do with it, how you respond to it, makes all the difference. So his harvest was so great that he had more grain than he even knew what to do with. He said, "Where shall I place my crops? What shall I do?" And that's the question that each and every one of us have to wrestle with. What shall I do with what God has given to me? With the abundance that God has given me, what shall I do with it? And so this man is faced with the same question that each and every one of us are faced with, which is, how much is enough? How much is enough? This brother has problems, y'all. Good problems, but it's still problems. He receives such an abundant harvest that he was not even prepared for. Now that he doesn't know what to do with. His barns that he already has are filled to the full. He's already loaded them up as much as he can, and now he has more left over that he doesn't know what to do with. And so can I remind you, we like to think that money will solve our problems, that more wealth will solve our problems. Money doesn't solve anything. It magnifies everything in your life. Whoever you are, whatever you're already doing, money is a magnifier. However disciplined you are, however focused you are, however much of a good steward or lack thereof you are, money will only magnify that for you. It reveals the condition of your heart more and more clearly the more and more you have of it. And so here is a man who has been blessed by God with riches, not to be condemned in any way. What a great blessing he has been given, and he asks the question, how much is enough? He's faced with that question. What am I going to do with all this? How much is enough? And unfortunately for him, he answers the question like most of us, if we're honest, have answered this question many times in our life, which is just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. He comes up with a plan. I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. All of us are guilty of doing this. Here's how I know. Every single one of you in here today, you are now in a place that previously in your life, you probably prayed for, you asked God for, and you said, when I'm there, I will then be content. And now you're there. And you're saying, God, but if you would just give me a little bit more. If you would just give me a little bit more. We're all just like this rich man. See, we like to think that we're not rich. We like to think this is applicable to somebody else. No, I'm talking to you. Like if you're here sitting here today saying, I hope the rich people are listening, this message is for you. You are the rich person. The fact that you're in this room today, you are rich. If you drove yourself in a vehicle here today, you are filthy rich. Look at your neighbor and say, you're filthy rich. Tell him. Look at him and say, you are too. You better listen up. Ask them if they're taking notes. Tell them this message is for you. This message is for you. And this man convinces himself that the solution is to store up way more than he would ever need. Did you catch it? He already had barns, y'all. He didn't go, this isn't a story about a man who had nothing and then finally got enough. No, this is a story about a man who already had more than enough. He already had barns, and he said, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build even bigger ones to store even more up for myself, so that I'm taken care of, so that I can be secure for the rest of my life, so that I can take life easy. Did you catch that? So that he could take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. And I can tell you, as somebody who has watched people do this exact same thing in their lifetimes many times over, I've seen many people do this, and they've convinced themselves that this is the path toward meaning and purpose and the good life, and then they end up living a miserable life for the rest of their lives. The moment you decide, I'm gonna take life easy, I'm gonna coast, I'm gonna check out, I've got more than enough for me, I'm not gonna worry about anybody else or anything else, I'm just gonna live for me, myself, and I'm gonna do what I want, the way I want, I'm good. Your life at that point no longer has any meaning, any purpose, or any significance, and you live a miserable life because of it. And so listen to me, do not make that the goal. Do not make that the target. I specifically want to say to those who are in our church, this is something that has blessed me so much. For the last couple of years, our church has grown tremendously. We are a multi-ethnic, multi-economic, and multi-generational church. That is the vision that God has given us from the beginning. That's who we are. That's who we will always be. And over the last couple of years, I have been so thankful, because I prayed for years that God would increase our multi-generational capacity of our church. And I have seen that happen. Y'all, when we started this church, when I planted this church, it'll be 10 years this November that City Church has been in existence. And when I planted this church, I was 29 years old. And they typically tell you, especially with a church plant, the church is going to reflect the age of the pastor within a handful of years. And then as the church grows, it'll grow in its generational diversity. But when we planted the church, I was 29 years old, and almost everybody that attended this church was like between the ages of like 17 and 30. And that was exciting until it came time for the offering. And all these 20-something-year-olds were given $4 offerings, but they only knew how to do it electronically. So they give a $4 offering with a $3 processing fee. We'd net $1. And we'd be like, I don't think we're going to make it, y'all. I don't think this ain't going to sustain this church very long. And so I prayed and prayed, not just because we needed dollars, we needed wisdom. We needed people who've lived some life, who've been walking with the Lord for some time to come along. And so God has continued to grow this church, especially in the last couple of years, just in so many people who are well older than me. Y'all, like, I don't feel old, but then I talk to like the majority of the people in this church, and they tell me I am old. I'm like, we're the same. They're like, no, bro, we are not the same anymore. No, you're married. You got, like, my daughter, she turns 13 this week. They're like, no, you are now old. You got a teenager in your house, you're old. That's what they tell me. But there are people in this church who you are a generation or two or three or four or five ahead of me. And so if you're here and you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or even 90s, listen, I want you to hear me say this. This is so significant to me. You chose to be a part of a church that wasn't built and designed for you. And I honor you for that. I honor you for that. Y'all, I get it every week. Every single service, every week, we have people who are in their older years, and sometimes it's literally because just they can't handle it. They will sit out in the lobby during the worship. And then they'll come in during the message, and they'll say, I want to be in there. It's just a little too loud, Pastor Chris. You turn that back down. If you just turn that down. And I always say, hey, I hear you. But I'll tell you, God's doing something with that noise. Because we saw 533 people get baptized in this church in 1 year last year. He's reaching lost people through that noise. And so I always say thank you. Thank you for choosing to be a part of a church that, again, y'all, wasn't built for you. It wasn't designed for you. Like, if you wanted to, you could go find a church that It's full of people just like you, same age, same stage, same season of life, but you have intentionally chosen to not take it easy. You've intentionally chosen to go where God has led you and to be a part of a movement of God where He is reaching people who have never experienced the gospel before. Now you're serving, you're giving, and you're coming alongside. And so I just want to honor you for that. And then I want to say to the young people in the church, be like that. Make that your goal. Make that your aim. There is no settling in. There is no taking the foot off the gas. There is no coasting and taking life easy. You are not promised tomorrow. In the same way that this man in the story is not promised tomorrow, you are not promised tomorrow. Verse 20, but God said to him, you fool. I never want to stand before God and have Him say those words to me. You fool, what were you thinking? You fool, I gave you everything you needed and you didn't listen to me. You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? You fool. You spent your whole life just looking after you, never caring for anybody else, never giving to anyone else. And now, what do you have to show for it? You're not promised tomorrow. None of us are. So what are you going to do with what's been placed in your hands right now? Verse 21, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. So again, how many of us have been guilty of being just like this man? Making promises to God, asking God for more, and then receiving the more, not being grateful, not being content with what we have, and then asking God for even more and making deals with God. I'm curious, how many of y'all have ever made a deal with God where you say, God, if you get me out of this mess, I'll never do it again. God, if you get me out of this financial mess, I'll never do it again. If you will solve this financial problem for me, I'll cut up the credit card tomorrow. And then God does, and then you still find yourself repeating the same decisions and patterns and behaviors that got you in the mess in the first place. I have people in this church who ask me something. They'll come to me and say, Pastor Chris, would you just pray that God would financially bless me? And depending on their patterns, their decisions, their behaviors, I'll be honest with them and say, I don't think I can do that right now. They look at me funny like, what's wrong with you? From the beginning of this church, I have prayed the same prayer. Because at the end of the day, wealth is going to exist. It's going to be in somebody's hands. It's going to be there. And it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to be in somebody's hands. And so the prayer that I have consistently prayed for this church is, God, would you give the most? Would you give the greatest wealth to the people who will be the very best stewards of it so that they can bless others, and they can bless this church, and they can advance the kingdom of God. That's my prayer. And so when people ask me, would you pray? Well, let's talk about how you're handling what God's already entrusted to you. So maybe instead I'll pray that you would learn by the power of the Holy Spirit how to live a self-disciplined life. That's one of the fruit of the Spirit. And I'll pray that you would learn how to walk in integrity when it comes to your finances. And then as you learn to steward what God has trusted to you, then He will be able to give you more. That's the prayer that I'm going to pray. How many of us have found ourselves just like this man? And then Jesus concludes, again, He concludes the parable by saying, this is how it will be with whoever, watch this, stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. So do not miss this. The point of the parable is not that rich people should be shamed. It's not that rich people are simply wrong for being rich. He doesn't say this is how it will be for whoever is rich. He says this is how it will be for whoever has an abundance, whoever has stored up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. So the point that Jesus is making here is not that you can't have wealth. He's not saying that you can't have money, that you can't have wealth, that you can't have possessions. The point that he's making is that those things cannot have you. And that's a very different thing. Yes, you are allowed to have wealth, money, and possessions. God gave it to the man. This is a story that Jesus made up, y'all. And He told it this way, that God gave the man who was already rich an abundance. There's nothing wrong with having it. The question is, does it have you? Does it have your heart? What are you doing with what God has given you? And Jesus says the litmus test to know whether or not you are greedy, to know whether or not your heart is full of greed, is not if you have these things, it's that you are not being generous toward God with them. So you want to know, am I a person that's greedy? Look at your bank account. Look at your track record. Look at your giving statements. Are you keeping it all to yourself? No matter how little or how much you have, are you keeping it all to yourself, or are you being consistently, faithfully, and intentionally generous with it? That's what Jesus is saying. So you can not like me for teaching this all day long. You still have to wrestle with the text. Either he's Lord or he's not. There's no in between. Jesus doesn't get to be Lord of 75% of your life, but when it comes to your money, wealth, and possessions, you get to be Lord over it. And Jesus makes the case that the solution, remember, he says, watch out, be on your guard. The solution to this slow creep of greed that can infect every one of our lives, the solution to greed is not poverty, it's generosity. Amen. That's the answer. Right. The answer to greed is not having less. It's being more generous. It's God entrusts you with more, you just become more and more and more generous. This is how it will be, he says, for whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. That's the case that Jesus is making. And so let me ask you, are you being rich toward God? Are you being faithfully, consistently, and intentionally generous toward God? Because again, this message is for you. You are the rich person. This is you. Every single one of you in here, you are the rich person. There are people all over the world who would trade anything to be in your seats, to have your resources, to have your wealth, your money, your possessions, no matter how little or how much it is. Right now, you are the rich person. So then the question is, what do we do? What do we do with this? What do we do with our riches? If we're the rich person, look at your neighbor and say, you're the rich person. Well, here's the answer. 1 Timothy, last passage. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. Command those who are rich. Did you catch that? Look at your neighbor and say, this is your command. Command, not suggest, not recommend. Command. God is your authority. This is his word for you. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Did you catch that? God has blessed you. He wants you to enjoy it. Right. He has richly provided, but put your hope in God. And then watch this, part 2 of the command. Verse 18, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So here is the command for all of us. We are the rich person. Every single one of us in here, the command is do not put your hope in wealth, put your hope in God. And then the second part of the command is to do good, to be rich. I love the play on words there. Be rich in good deeds, to be generous, and to be willing to share. What are you doing with what God has already placed in your hands? Are you being a good steward of it? And one of the best ways to be a good steward of it is to be rich in good deeds, to be generous, and to be willing to share. And the point he makes is that is where life, the real life, the good life, the meaningful life, the significant life, the purposeful life, the abundant life is found. The abundant life is found not in an abundance of things, but in an abundance of generosity. Right. It's in an abundance of giving to others and giving to the kingdom of God and advancing his purposes. Y'all, I will tell you from personal experience now, my wife and I have decades. We are entering 2 decades of living these principles out. Again, I know I'm old, all right? All the young people are like, see, I told you, you're old. 2 decades of doing this together. And we have story after story after story. Our greatest memories in life, some of the greatest moments in our life, the highlights of our life are when God has put us in position positions to be able to be generous and to live that out and to make an impact on other people and to make an impact for the kingdom of God. That is where purpose is found. That's where life is found. And so practically, what does this look like? I know I'm over time. Real quick, 3 things. We're going to unpack this more specifically in more detail next week, but I just want to give them to you now to begin praying over it and thinking about it. 3 things. What does this look like? Number 1, we give first. We give first. Some of you have heard me preach this before, and you go, yeah, I think I remember you saying that, and I just chose not to. I said, I'll give. I'm just not going to give first, and you still haven't given. Here's why. You will never give until you give first. You won't. You will never consistently, faithfully, and intentionally give until you give first, meaning it's the first thing that you do with whatever God has entrusted to you. Before you pay bills, before you spend any money on yourself, you give first. Secondly, we save second. You give first, you save second. Again, before you do anything else, before you spend money on things that you want, you save for the unexpected things that you're going to need. And then finally, we live on the rest. Do those 3 things, and I'm going to unpack that in more detail next week, but I wanted to give you at least a little bit of a lead time and begin to pray about that and ask yourself, am I living this out? But if you live this out, this is as simple as it can be. This is the plan that God has laid out for us in his word, that we would give first, that we would save second, and that we would live on the rest. And I'm telling you, it will be a blessing to you and a blessing to everyone around you.